Jennifer Ewan from Senator Baucus's staff. She has a message from the senator who we had hoped could join us today, but he had other commitments, couldn't be here. So Jennifer Ewan from Senator Max Baucus's staff.
Good afternoon. I work for Max in Missoula. I'm Max's field director, and I also handle all legal, judicial, law enforcement issues for Max in-state. I'm Max's in-state counsel. And like Mr. Malloy said, he cannot be here today, so he sent a letter along, and I'd like to read it to you. Hello, friends. I wish I could join you as you increase awareness about what financial reform means for Montanans and how it fits into the larger goal of protecting consumers. I am currently in China on a mission that feeds directly into consumer protection. I am pressing Chinese leaders to address the nation's undervalued currency and effective protection of intellectual property rights to see if we can open China's markets to Montana beef. I'd like to thank Attorney General Steve Bullock for his leadership and for his steady and strong voice in protecting Montana consumers and upholding the state's constitution. In Montana, a handshake means something, and our word is our bond. It's those values that make for good business in on Montana's main streets, and the same values that folks on Wall Street need to learn from. That's why I fought for strong financial reforms to stand up for middle-class families and small businesses who have fallen victim to Wall Street's recklessness and greed. The financial reform measures we passed this year are designed to put an end to taxpayer bailouts. They usher in some much-needed transparency and accountability necessary to help end the risky financial transactions that led to one of the toughest economic downturns on record. Most folks I know don't ask for much. They want to be able to earn an honest paycheck for a hard day's work and to be able to put some aside for a rainy day. College tuitions for their kids or retirement. I'll keep fighting to make sure our hardworking Montanans don't lose their homes, pensions, or jobs because some companies don't want to play by the rules. As chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, you can count on me to keep working with partners on all levels to stop deceptive business practices and cut taxes for hardworking Montanans. Again, I applaud Attorney General Bullock for putting together this important forum on consumer protection. Together we can keep working to make Montana an even better place to live, work, and raise a family. All the best, Max. And for those of you who are in Missoula or out, please feel free to stop in and chat with me anytime. If it's not my area of expertise, I can definitely get you to the right person. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. I'm honored and happy to have the opportunity to introduce our next speaker, Senator Jon Tester. And I sense, I guess, Senator Tester needs no introduction to us in Montana. He's well known to us. But having said that, I'm going to give you one anyway. Senator Tester, as everyone knows, is from Big Sandy. He's a working senator. I think was recently profiled in the national press that in the fall break, when many senators were out hobnobbing, raising money, traveling, Senator Tester and his wife Charla were doing what they always do, and that is working the land up near Big Sandy, Montana. And he's been our senator in the state since November of 2006. He's got a long career in public service. He ran for the state legislature after serving his local community on the school board, soil conservation committee, and he ran in the wake of deregulation in this state, largely motivated by a sense of wanting to help people whom he felt were not getting a fair shake in Helena, and now is trying to do the same in Washington, D.C. He is a graduate of the College of Great Falls with a Bachelor of Science in Music. I've never heard you do anything musically. Maybe you could do that for us sometime. I'm sure you're talented. So, I have to add that being a northern Montanan I'm a native of Malta, we never lost to the Big Sandy Pioneers. Now they're a small town. We're still a Class B, and they're down in the Class C rank, so we don't play anymore. But Senator Tester is a member of the Powerful Appropriations Committee in the U.S. Senate, as well as the Senate Banking Committee, which was the committee out of which the Dodd-Frank bill came. He was instrumental in the development of the legislation, and in doing so, protecting what he felt were very important interests back here in Montana and on Main Street, to make sure that the reform that I think all agreed was necessary was targeted at the causes, and that those that did not cause it did not get penalized in the process. Our office had the pleasure of having access, as we in Montana can have, and therefore Steve was able to play a very significant role nationally with the National Attorneys General Association in working on issues about protecting states' abilities and preemption issues, and Senator Tester and his staff were very, very helpful in that. So without further ado, Senator John Tester.
Thank you. Thank you very much. See if we can make this thing work, as long as it'll pick it up. I've just got a few things to talk about the mighty Malta Mustangs, and why I don't sing, because I could empty this room right now, guaranteed, no doubt about it. And I will tell you why. Where'd he go? Where's he at? Where's Malloy at? I can tell you why that Malta always beat Big Sandy. It's because I was a musician. That's why. Now, when I was an eighth grader, and I know this will be hard for some of you to believe, but when I was an eighth grader, I was pretty good sized, and I had it was district tournaments, which Malta and Chinook and Harlem and all those guys were playing. That's when Big Sandy was big, and I'll never forget standing there with my horn, ready to go and start the next game, and the Mustangs had played somebody before, and Dwayne Walker was playing for the Mustangs, and then Dwayne Walker came walking by me, and this guy was as big as a mountain. I mean, he was huge, and I said to myself, John, you need to stick with music, and I did. But it was good. Hey, I want to thank you, Jim, for the kind introduction. I want to thank Steve Bullock for inviting me to be a part of this event. It is great to be here with you. And let me say this, I'm very, very pleased how Steve has been able to bring together such a great group of folks to help us understand what the Wall Street reform law means to Montana and for Main Streets across this country. I've had conversations with many of you over the past several months on how this reform will benefit Montana's consumers, financial institutions, and small businesses. And it was pointed out, as a member of the Banking Committee, I try to approach the issues that come before that community with the view of Montanans that I represent in mind. When Montanans think about the financial industry, they don't usually think about Wall Street. They think about community banks. They think about credit unions, where they're doing their banking and getting the financing that they need to do their business. Montanans, I think it's fair to say, were appalled by the reckless and greedy Wall Street banks that truly brought this country to the brink of another depression. And it's one of the reasons why I voted against the Wall Street bailout. I voted against the auto bailout, because I thought the taxpayers were getting a raw deal. And besides that, I don't believe in bailouts. Montanans did not cause this economic crisis. Montanans should not have to pay for the sins of greedy folks on Wall Street. And so as I worked with the Banking Committee on the Wall Street reform law, one of my primary concerns was to finally get rid of the notion that any business was too big to fail, and that we have strong resolution authority to hold Wall Street accountable and provide clear rules of the road. Banks will be forced to pay their own liquidation should they fail, and that will ensure that we never face taxpayer-funded bailouts again. The Wall Street Reform Bill does all those things. And let me tell you, I'm amazed by how some of the big banks have behaved before the collapse. Early this year, some of you may have seen it, I participated in an investigative hearing with executives from Goldman Sachs. And it was just astounding to me of the schemes that they were selling their clients. And it is clear that our economy was on the brink of a disaster because many financial institutions simply were not playing by the rules. Consumers were drawn into mortgages and other exotic products that they couldn't afford and they didn't understand. In some cases, regulators didn't see the warning signs, and they didn't anticipate the magnitude of the problems facing our country. In other cases, there were no regulators at all. The challenge in writing this law was how to crack down on the Wall Street players and those responsible for the crisis without hurting the folks that have been playing by the rules. That is why I pushed hard for credit unions and banks with assets of less than $10 billion to be exempt from examination and enforcement by the new Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. This law will also streamline regulation of Wall Street, providing regulators with the tools that they need to get the job fairly and effectively, and to see across the silos that they've been operating in. The Wall Street reform law also ensures that everyone now will be playing by the same rules, and that the unregulated entities offering financial products have to live up to the same standards as community banks and credit unions that currently serve Montana. The law has tough new rules to prevent the spread of risky and dangerous products like subprime mortgages and exotic derivatives, the things that torpedoed our entire nation's financial industry. In working on this law over the past year, my focus has been to try to make sure that this law was right for Montana, that it was right for rural America. That's why I added language that would require the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to consider all the impacts of any proposed rules on credit unions and banks under $10 billion of assets. The Bureau also has to consider the impact that these rules will have on rural consumers before those rules are made. And let me also note that even in this area of bitter partisanship, the Senate unanimously passed an amendment that I offered to make sure that the banks only pay their fair share of federal deposit insurance. Right now, smaller community banks are paying for 30% of this insurance, even though they only account for about 20% of all bank assets. And they were hit with a 2-year prospective assessment because of the losses that were occurred in this fund, and that doesn't make sense. This legislation ensures that community banks won't be punished for bad behavior of the mortgage brokers that offered risky mortgages. Those banks will be able to maintain the community-based regulators that they currently have. And it's the same case of state-chartered banks, the same lending limits that they currently have. And the reform ensures that community banks will be able to continue to provide their consumers the same mortgage products, including those specific to farmers and small business and others in rural America. That's important because Montana's families rely on their community banks to finance and grow their businesses, their farms, to pay their bills, to help put their kids through school. The law protects investors with tough new rules for transparency and accountability. That includes standards requiring all financial advisors to act in the best interest of their clients. That's amazing. I thought they were going to do that anyway, but they haven't been, but now they have to. Sadly, Montana has had a share of bilkers, exploiters, schemers, and frauds who have taken advantage of hardworking, honest folks. The new law is going to make it a lot harder for those folks to do business. This law also eliminates loopholes. That means we'll see a crackdown on things like predatory mortgages, over-the-counter derivatives, and asset-backed securities. This law will also continue to allow attorney generals like Steve to enforce consumer protection rules and go after bad actors. I got to say that again because I want to make sure Steve's listening. This law will also continue to allow state attorney generals like Steve to enforce consumer protection rules and go after bad actors. That's very important. Our reform authorizes the Securities Exchange Commission to establish guidelines for investment advisors to act in the best interest of their clients and disclose any conflicts of interest that they might have. That will force investment advisors, like those boys at Goldman Sachs, to disclose the risks associated with the products that they're selling. And it will disclose any conflicts of interest that they might have, such as betting against their products that they're selling to their clients. And it also exempts small companies from the costly additional compliance and regulation under Sarbanes-Oxley. Simply put, this Wall Street reform law is a win for Main Street. It holds Wall Street accountable and preserves the critical role community banks have in strengthening our communities and creating jobs and building small businesses. It's a strong bill because it ends taxpayer bailouts, taxpayer-funded bailouts. It begins a new era of strong, common-sense regulation to put the sideboards on our fast-moving financial industry without taking away the fundamental tools it needs for healthy competition and growth and strengthening of our economy. But let me be clear. Our work on this legislation did not end with the President's signature. I will continue to be vigilant to ensure that this legislation is implemented and enforced in a way that it was intended. To do this, we need to continue to hear from you about how things are going on the ground. We need to ensure that the regulatory plan we created has the fortitude to take on any future economic crisis. Now, I know that we're facing some very difficult economic times. Some have questioned whether this was the right time to pass a Wall Street reform legislation bill. Our economic security depends on our ability to end taxpayer bailouts and to bring common sense regulation to those folks on Wall Street. Clearly, we still have our work cut out for us, for our economy to grow, to create jobs, to improve our climate for small businesses, but I'm optimistic about our prospects, especially here in Montana. As I travel around the state, I see good signs of recovery. I see small businesses growing. It's been a banner year for farmers. I see innovation. I see hard work. Folks, we continue to live in the greatest state and the greatest nation in the world. We've got a heck of a lot to look forward to. We've got tremendous opportunity with those challenges that are in front of us. While some folks insist on only looking at the negative these days, it's important to never lose sight of the good. Our economy has come back from the brink of disaster in just 2 years. We'll get through this tough economic times if we work together and we find ways to create and sustain jobs in Montana. Our hard work, our values, our innovation as small business state has brought us this far and will give us the strength to rebuild our economy into the future. I want to once again thank Steve for inviting me to this conference. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you all the very best. And I understand we have opportunity for some questions. Thank you. Who wants to be first? I guess I don't control those mics. Raise your hand. There we go, in the back.
You said that banks that have assets under $10 billion are exempt from the regulations?
No. I said they're exempt from the regulation of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. That's
correct. Do you know how many banks that is in Montana that would be over that limit?
I think Wells is over it, and I think there's 2 banks. None that are domiciled here, but I think there's 2 banks that are over it. I can't remember. Allie, what's the other one? U.S. Bank. U.S. Bank, that's right. Wells and U.S. Bank.
Thanks.
Yes? Here we go.
My experience with this small bank lending has been
And that the little guy simply cannot get the funding for small business that's being touted by the federal government. And I'm wondering what can be done in little rural communities to make access to small business funds easier. It's almost impossible right now.
Well, it's a great question. It's a question that is brought up regularly in the industry. I will tell you what, and there's plenty of bankers here to attest to this for themselves. The bankers tell me that they have money. They have money to lend. The issue, I think, for most of the folks that are in the business know that because of what happened in September of 08, I think the regulators have reacted in such a way where they don't want to have anybody failing on their watch, so they've tightened up, and maybe too much so, to be honest with you. And I think that and we pound Bernanke and others on this all the time, whether it's in hearings or whether it's in my office. There's got to be some common sense put to the regulatory scheme that's out there currently, and this bill won't be fully implemented until July. But I think many of the banks on these loans that would have been granted in years past, I think, and I hope I'm not stepping out of line here, but I think the regulators are saying, time out, we don't want you to make that one. And I think that's stopping some of the liquidity in the marketplace. And so I understand where the regulators are coming from, but I also understand that if we're going to help move the economy forward, small business is the driver, not only in the state of Montana, but throughout the country. And we need to figure out a way to get better consistency and more common sense in the regulatory scheme. Yes.
Senator Tester. I was wondering what you think would happen to this bill, or what may happen to the bill, if the Republicans take over either the House or the Senate or both next year.
I don't think that's going to happen, personally. I think that some people would like to have that happen, but I will tell you that this bill, even though we didn't get a lot of bipartisan support for it in the end, that's kind of the nature of the beast at this point in time. I think the bill is a bill that we got here because of things that have happened, and I think that if we ever end up in a situation again where people's retirement, people's college kids' tuition, and those kind of things are taken away through no fault of their own, just because some people saw a system that they could take advantage of and took advantage of. And to be honest with you, and these were Paulson's words, not mine, and I've said them many times before because I thought it was incredible when he said them. It wasn't that we had too few of regulators on the field. It's the fact they had none in some cases. And so I don't think there's going to be anything done with this bill. I think that that wouldn't be done anyway. I mean, I think my challenge in the U.S. Senate, in my position, and I think it doesn't matter if you're on banking committee or not, is to make sure that this bill is implemented in a way that makes sense for the whole country. My perspective is going to be rural America, but for the whole country. And so I don't think it's going to be changed. But gosh, I guess you never know. You never know. Elections, funny things can happen. But we shall see. We shall see, depending on what's going on. But I'm a little biased in my perspective. But I think the election, when it gets over with, we're going to survive and we're going to move forward. And hopefully, if anything comes out of it, it'll be an opportunity to work together instead of continue to be filibuster and everything. Yeah. Other questions? Yes, over here.
There's some discussion that the recovery is lagging because businesses are reluctant to make investments and so forth, given the uncertainty in the tax environment. And of course, that coincides with the uncertainty regarding estate tax reform and so forth. Do you have a feeling as to when that may be resolved?
It's unfortunate it isn't resolved already. I think it will be resolved in November when we go back. I think it's critically important that we do. I think there has to be stability in the tax code, especially when it comes to inheritance tax. I think that you can't. Not everybody can be as lucky as George Steinbrenner, I guess, is the best way to put it. I mean, I think you need to have the ability to plan long term, and I think the inheritance tax is one there. I do want to say something else about the way things are going in the economy, and I'll apply it to myself because. To be honest with you, we had a pretty damn good year agriculturally last year, and we've had a really good year agriculturally this year. I've got my crops marketed pretty darn well. And then I got this Senate job too. So I've got multiple sources of income, and I've got to make a large capital expenditure. I've got to buy a different combine. My old combine it's good combine, but I've got to have something that has a better chance of running than breaking down because I'm not there as much. And so I've had 2 good years back to back, marketed it right, production's been up, I've got Senate income, and quite frankly, when I turn the news on and I listen to the news, I go, I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't even be thinking about buying a combine because the world's going to end tomorrow as I know it. And I've got to tell you something, when I go around the state of Montana, and if you don't have a job, you don't have a job, and this doesn't apply because if you don't have a job, you need to get to the COT over here in Missoula and get retrained or something. But when I go around the state of Montana and talk to folks, things are a heck of a lot better than they were a year ago, and a heck of a lot better than they were 2 years ago, and they're in a lot of cases at 07 levels. I mean. And I don't care if you're talking about transportation industry or if you're talking about Main Street businesses. Now, things are getting better. And it was interesting because I was down in Butte the other day. I was on the radio, and we were talking about that. And we got off the radio, and the guy who owned the station walked up to me and said, we're back at 07 levels. And by the way, if people weren't making money, the first thing they throw out is advertising. I think the economy is moving in the right direction. But I'll also tell you that I think that the tax system needs to be fixed. It should be fixed in November. Should have been fixed last March, but it wasn't. We'll fix it in November. At least I hope we fix it in November. And the fact is, as I said earlier in this speech, and I believe this, and I've been enough places now where I really believe this. We live in the best state and the best country in the world. We've been through far tougher times than this in Montana. I'll tell you we have. This was a bad economic situation that we were in countrywide, but in Montana we've been in worse times. I feel it anyway. And I think that it's just a matter of rolling up your sleeves and going to work. Are there things we need to do to make the system better? Absolutely. Do we need to get our regulators to work better together? Absolutely. Do we need to get the bad actors off the street? You bet we do, because those bad actors give the good actors a bad name. And we need to work to get work to every opportunity to create jobs in the country. But the bottom line is that when I turn on the TV, it depresses the hell out of me. And I, like I said, we're coming off some pretty good things, and I'm sitting there going, gosh, I don't want to make, because these guys are right. Gosh, it's going to be the end of the world as we know it. So that's the way it is. No, I haven't actually. I had one lined out, and I've thought to myself, gosh, I'm going to keep looking. Maybe I can save some money. I mean, it's a huge capital expense for me, but is there? All right. All right. Perfect. That'll work. Yes, indeed. Yes.
I have a question. I've heard this book about this book called Aftershock, and there's some discussion about the bond market taking a bust, and I'm just wondering if Congress is tuned into that discussion.
I can't say no, but not yet. I mean, there's issues that revolve around bonding for projects, hospitals, and those kind of things. But no, I guess, to let you know, where besides implementation of this bill and make sure it does what it's supposed to do, what the intent is, our next major task, I think, is Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and making sure that gets changed so it isn't a vat that we throw money into. And by the way, there was plenty of opportunities to do away with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, but that's not fixing the situation. No, but that doesn't mean there aren't other people that are talking about it. Yes.
There's one thing that I've had a hard time understanding, and maybe you could explain it. Why is it that these Wall Street banks continue to pull down hundreds of billions of dollars in bonuses, and no one's dropping the hammer on them? Yeah. I mean, these guys, we know they probably all committed fraud. Yeah. They're not being thrown in jail. But at least, I mean, why can't we do anything to stop them? And I'm not blaming you, because I know you didn't create the problem, but as someone on the banking committee, I mean, I feel like it's really frustrating to see these guys getting away with murder. I mean, is there anything that's ever going to be done about it? I mean, I know that they run Congress more or less. I mean, they have tons of influence. Well, Dick Durbin said it. I mean, Dick Durbin's the number 3 guy. He said it. So I mean, I'm not blaming you, Senator.
No, it's okay.
But it's frustrating.
I've been waiting for him to run me. I mean,
and I'm not saying you personally, but no. I mean, as a general principle, that has been stated. So
well, I mean, look, if I voted for the Wall Street reform, I could probably get up there and tell you why we need to do it. But one of the reasons I thought we shouldn't do it, over and above the taxpayer bailout, is I didn't think the people who created the problem would have to suffer at all, and I guess they haven't. And I guess, I mean, we had the kids from Goldman Sachs that I talked about in the speech. These are 30-year-old young gentlemen that, quite frankly, were about the cockiest 3-4 guys I ever seen in my life. I mean, I was asking them questions, and it was like, my attorney told me, no offense, Malloy, my attorney told me not to answer these questions, and I'm not going to answer these questions, And they were and I remember one of the questions I asked him was, who do you represent? Do you represent the firm or do you represent your clients? And they wouldn't answer it. I mean, that's a slam dunk, And so getting to your point about the exec, and by the way, these guys were making tens of millions of dollars, a lot. They could afford to buy a new combine. And and the deal is that I don't know what to do with them. I guarantee you, if we threw them in the hoosegow, there'd be people standing up saying you're screwing with the free market system. I guarantee that'd be the case. Do they need to be in jail? You better believe it, because they stole people's money. And tell me how to do it. I'll work to do it. But that's really it. Yeah. One more question. So this is going to be a doozy. Yeah, right over here. If this will work.
Yeah. Senator Tester, thanks for joining us here today. I was at the meeting about a month ago where the president of the Federal Reserve came in, and he's in charge of many states out of Minneapolis. And I didn't get the feeling that he had a true understanding of what's happening in the Bitterroot Valley, or specifically western Montana, where the jobless rates are increasing and where real estate remains a problem. Could you comment on a little bit of that?
Yeah, I think that first of all, as far as jobs go, and when I say Montana's come through this pretty well, absolutely the Bitterroot, northwestern Montana, or they're hurting probably. Well, they're hurting more than anywhere, and that has to happen. That also tells me why when we deal with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, we've got to do it with a certain amount of caution, but it's got to be dealt with in a way that works for. Otherwise, the housing market will totally flop. I can't speak for the Federal Reserve. I can tell you that we, my office, myself, get around the state all the time looking for opportunities to push forward projects, whether that's infrastructure, whether that's cleaning up stuff, whether it's whatever it might be to help move business forward. I think as long as you have areas where you have high unemployment, the housing issue is going to be a difficult issue, because that's where the people have their money, and if they don't have a job, they don't have any money, and it puts everything at risk. All I can say is that the higher growth areas are the ones that get hit the hardest, and hopefully as we move forward, and hopefully as we try to get a manufacturing base back in this country, and hopefully as we try to cut a few trees here and there, it's going to put some people to work, and things will get popping again. But I don't think there's any silver bullet to this. I'll take what we've got in the Bitterroot and up in Kalispell compared to what they got down in Arizona or Florida or places like that. But by the same token, we've got to use our heads, and we've got to move forward in a way that'll make sense for the country. And I think there are some opportunities down there, but those opportunities are going to come from the ground. And I think, as I said earlier about regulation of the community banks and credit unions and things like that, we've got to make sure that regulation, just like the tax code, is consistent, dependable, and so people need to know how to move forward. And that's what I try to do. So, anyway, thank you all. Appreciate it very much. Thanks.
I, too, want to thank Senator Tester for coming today, and also to show that I was listening, Senator Tester, when you said that the states do play a role. Also want to personally thank him. His role on the Banking Committee as Congress looked at financial reform, one of the larger concerns, which I'll talk about a little bit more when I go through my 2 cents a little bit later, but what role would the states play? And there was real concern that the states would get cut out of this ultimately, and we would all be relying on Washington. But through Senator Tester's help and others that recognized that having the cops on the beat, if you will, locally made a big difference, that those preemption issues didn't arise. So thank you again, Senator Tester, for being part of this. We're going to take about a 15-minute break while we set up for the next panel.